There's a tendency when you're busy to take your best tradesperson or tech and turn them into a manager. But this could be a massive problem for your business. Now, tune into today's episode where we unpack what it takes to be a successful manager and who you should look to promote in your business. Not only do you lose the best person off the tools or out in the field, and then you start losing your other tradespeople as well.
They've gone from being someone that everyone looks up to as being good at their job to being someone who's just an overbearing dickhead.
So do you know what our friend did? He decided to promote this person to... And that went bad as well. You start to lose faith and confidence in actually having managers. Newsflash, you may not be the best manager either. Some of this stuff might be helpful for you.
They're used to winning, and you've just put them in a situation where they're not winning, they start losing, and what they're going to do is one of two things.
Well, howdy there. Welcome to the Profitable Tradie podcast. I'm your host, Tony Fraser-Jones, hanging out with my good buddy, Phil Smith, co-host.
Co-host extraordinaire.
Yeah. Nothing like a bit of self-praise, my man.
No, that's right. What did you say? Self-praise is no endorsement?
My father used to say self-praise is no recommendation.
That's it. Well, you know what? I still will self-praise. I do like to do it. It's a good thing to do, pump your own tyres if no one else will pump them.
My dad always used to say there's no such word as can't. That used to drive me insane.
Yeah.
And then we got on the beers one night and he started laughing and he said, you know who else used to say that?
His dad.
Yeah,
it's like any good saying. Passed down through the generations, never was correct, but we'll all say it again.
That's right. Torment your kids with it. What are we talking about today, Chief?
Well, we're talking about management, actually, management of your team. And I think, you definitely get to a point where you're going to need a manager to actually run your team of tradesmen or techs. Comes along all the time. Eventually, you actually need more than one. But when you first come to that point, it could be for a couple of reasons. Number one, it might be that your team is growing and it's just getting too much for you. So, you need some help in that department. Or maybe you've even had a manager already, but maybe they've left and need replacement. And so you're searching for who's going to be the best fit and who you might be able to put into that role. And the real risk is that you start looking around and maybe you've got a gun tech who's just clearly the best on your team. Absolute weapon, the man on the tools. And you're thinking they might be a good fit. But there are some risks with that.
There are, and the team will look up to them and you'll think, yeah, this is awesome because they all respect this person. But unfortunately, experience shows that this could work or it could not work. Right. And just because that person is an amazing tech or tradesperson, absolute gun at getting work done, absolute weapon, doesn't necessarily make them a weapon at being a manager or a leader or an operations manager or four-person or project manager, whatever you want to call that person.
That's right.
And so there's definitely some things to look out for with this because it can feel like you've cracked it. You've got this person who's incredible, and if you get it wrong, then it's not good because you can end up blowing up a great employee as well as the team.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure you have a story to kick us off.
I do have a story. This is about a past member who had a business, plumbing business, and they had a gun employee, absolute weapon on the tools. And he promoted this person to be the operations manager. And there were a few wobbles at the start, but he kept trying to train this person. But after about 6 to 8 months, the team, people were leaving, projects were overrunning. There was a lot of frustration between the person we're coaching and this manager. And it became really apparent that this person just was not the person to lead a team. So do you know what our friend did? He decided to promote this person to estimator. And that went bad as well.
The old sideways promotion.
Yeah, the old sideways promotion to get rid of a problem, and that didn't go well either. So we had to spend a lot of time actually sorting this issue out, and it was a massive learning curve because you had this great tradesperson, not a good manager, rubbed all the team up the wrong way, was just didn't have the skills to do the job, and then sent them over to be the estimator, which they also messed up. But anyway, that's another story.
They've actually now been promoted to customer. So
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so unfortunately,
no longer with us.
Yeah, no longer with us. But hey, look, that's a very, very common trap we can fall into, and it all feels like a good idea for on both sides of the equation at the start, but definitely some issues we can run into if we're not doing this the right way. So I reckon good thing would be dig into those issues.
Yeah, look, the big thing is you've got this gun, you promote them, but if it doesn't work out, the productivity of your jobs is going to take a massive hit. Not only do you lose the best person off the tools or out in the field, which damages productivity, but the rest of the team now their motivation goes down, the organisation goes down, they get frustrated, and their productivity goes down. So it's like a double hit, and then as a result, your margins suffer. Obviously, that flows through into your your cash flow and your profitability. the culture of the business, this is really important, starts to go down. If you have the wrong person leading people, it just has a huge effect on culture. And then you start losing your other tradespeople as well.
Yeah.
And that's massive. And here's the real kicker. This really hurts, is you actually start, as an owner, you start to lose faith and confidence in actually having managers.
Yeah.
Which completely stuffs your business long term. You're like, oh, well, no one's going to be able to do the job the way I can do it. Newsflash, you may not be the best manager either. Some of this stuff might be helpful for you. But you actually lose faith in managers, and that does terrible things for your business, because then you become gun-shy about doing this. And frankly, if you don't have good managers, good leaders, you can't grow a business. Yeah, and it can 100%. Be done. And what actually happens in the end, you create a whole bunch of problems when you were trying to solve a problem. So you multiply your problems.
I mean, if I could add one as well, for me, like, I also find that probably because the person you promoted in this case was your best person in the field or on the tools, they're probably a winner. They're used to winning, and you've just put them in a situation where they're not winning, they start losing, and what they're going to do is one of two things. They're either going to try to jump back on the tools because that's where they can find their wins, and that's going to be counterproductive, or they're going to start absolutely pushing the hell out of their team in a very negative and frustrated way, because they're actually frustrated at themselves and their own lack of performance, but they're going to throw that onto the team, which, as you said, is really damaging to culture, because they've gone from being someone that everyone looks up to as being good at their job to being someone who's just an overbearing dickhead who is basically just mean. And mean because they are underperforming, and so that's just toxic. So some huge issues.
And I think you've hit on two key points here. This is where it goes wrong. That gun on the tools or out in the field, when they're put in that management position, that ops manager or foreperson, whatever you like to call it, you're running the team. When they get under pressure, they tend to do one of two things, as you said. They'll either try and do more work themselves and actually go out and solve all the problems out in the field. It seems like the answer because that's what they're good at, but it's not the answer because that, basically stuffs the whole team, or they become basically, like you say, a dictator.
It's your classic fight or flight, right? Yeah. I mean, like, under pressure, that you got fight or flight response. And I mean, like, the fight here is that they start fighting with the team about why the team can't perform to their level, or the flight, where basically they fly from their role, which is, off the tools and in the office and getting stuff done, and they fly back to the tools where they know what they're doing, they feel like they can get wins, but it's actually just fight or flight, really.
And how many business owners do that? Let's be honest, if you're listening, you get under pressure, you're like, I'm just going to get out in the field and smash out some jobs because I know that I don't have to think about it too much. I feel like I'm winning. I can actually see, directly the impact of my efforts, whereas growing a business, leadership, it's more indirect, which can be a little frustrating at times.
Yeah, and you do it the whole way through. I mean, your manager starts struggling, so you jump back into managing the team they should be managing. Your estimator's struggling, well, then you say, I'll price a few jobs, just get them ahead. It's the same thing, really. But on the other hand, like, if we do this right, there are some huge upsides if we can actually.
Well, the key is you create leverage, and so when you get a good person in that role, you've leveraged your time. You've got someone else doing that work that you weren't, that you used to be doing, and then it frees up time for you to do other things. Which the things you could do. Number one is you can chill out a bit more, which is probably pretty important. Take a little bit of a load off mentally and physically. But secondly, you can use that time to actually grow your business. Focus on other stuff in your business, systems, processes, getting new clients, hiring other key people. There's a whole bunch of stuff. And the cool thing, when you get a good ops person, is it takes a lot of urgency out of your life. If you're not dealing with all the phone calls, it means your brain is in a much better state. When you've got stuff coming at you all the time, phone calls, materials, clients, suppliers, etc., deadlines, you are in a very reactive mindset, and that is what operations management is often about. Obviously, there's planning part of it, but it's dealing with the day-to-day stuff as well. But gets you out of that headspace, which is great. And you've got one person dedicated to the role. Now, you might be thinking, and I struggled with this as a leader as well, as like, they'll never do as good a job as me. But what you'll find is if they can focus on one job, they'll do it better than you. And that's a little humbling, but actually quite liberating as well. And in the end, the productivity and the margins go up. And it builds your confidence. It's the flip side. So you get a good person, the right person, it builds your confidence that you can grow a team, that you've got leaders who can do the job. And that is that's the essence of growing a business, getting good people who can take on responsibility. Because at the end of the day, team is the key to business success. Time, money, and freedom kind of should be spelt team, really.
Yeah. Actually. So, I mean, when we get all this in place, huge upsides. And I think what we want to do now is dig into how we actually do it. So, I mean, for me, I think we really start with one big problem, right?
Yeah. Well, the big problem is that most people think because you're good at one thing, you're going to be good at another. And that's just not true, because you might be, but often you're not. And I think on today's pod, a lot of this is about understanding what the problem actually is, because once you understand the problem, then you probably figure out some of the solutions. But it might be true that your best tradesperson is going to be a good manager. And some are, a lot are, but a lot aren't. And if you think about from a sporting angle, are the best sports people always the best coaches?
No, definitely not.
Often they're not. Often the best coaches have a different set of skills that makes them good. They may have just been a decent player, but not a great player.
And the best sportsman's not even always the best captain, you know.
No,
so,
exactly.
I mean, and that's a common mistake in sport, is that the best player becomes a captain of the team, but they're actually useless at leading people. They, sometimes can be an arrogant dickhead. Plenty of examples of that. Look at Allen Iverson. But anyway, we won't go there. So yeah, definitely some problems. But I think when you're putting people up into these leadership positions, there are definitely a few things to consider. I think first place to start for me is Gino Wickman. He wrote a great book called Traction. He's written a couple others as well, but talks about a concept of get it, want it, and capacity to do it. So, the first one is get it. And in this case, like, if you don't really understand the role, then you don't get it. And once you get it, you need to want it. So, I understand what it is. Now I need to want it. And I think half the time, if they don't get it properly, they think they want it. And we'll dig into this shortly, but they think they want it, but they actually don't, because they don't understand what they're wanting. And then lastly, once they understand the role and they really, have committed to that's what they want to do, then they need to actually be able to do it, which is the capacity. So I think if we pull these apart one by one, it's a good place to start.
Yeah, and I think starting with the get it is important. So get it is, what is this actual job about? Do they understand in detail what they're actually getting into? Because that's a big thing. And there's always the perception and the reality. And so for someone who's perhaps on the tools and thinking about, I want a promotion and I want more money, their sort of perception of what an ops manager role would look like, or, it might be another role down the track, but we'll just use this as an example, is they might think, well, I'm going to get off the tools, so, hey, I don't have to crawl around in roof spaces anymore, I don't have to dig ditches anymore, I don't have to pull cable, and I'm going to get an office, so, when it's wet, I'm going to be dry, and when it's hot, I'm going to be cool, and when it's cool, I'm going to be warm.
When it's snowing, I'm not out in
the weather. Yeah, I'm going to be paid more. And, man, I'm going to get an awesome new truck or a new ute. It's going to be cool. I'm going to get a laptop,
phone, iPad, whatever.
The whole, and I'm going to be able to tell people what to do, and that's the way it's going to be. And, that does sound good. I want that job as well.
Yeah.
But, is that the reality? Well, an operations manager role, when you're going from on the tools to ops, is completely different. It's actually a pretty difficult role. It means that you are responsible for organising the jobs, the clients, the materials, the team, the schedule, all that sort of stuff, making sure it all works. It's about taking phone calls, and we're not talking 2 phone calls, we're talking 70, 100 phone calls a day. Your phone and your ear hole are going to be on fire.
Yeah.
It's staff issues. It's like, Neil didn't show up this morning. Or it's Johnny the apprentice. He's having girlfriend problems. Like
Mike's cat died.
You've got to deal with that stuff. It's difficult clients who are unreasonable, who ring up and say, I need you to be there this afternoon, and they're a really key building contractor or general contractor you work with, and you're like, well, I've got the whole week planned. How am I going to deal with that? What are we going to do? It's constant stress. It's indirect influence.
Yeah.
So you're not doing the job. You're relying on your team to do the job, so you've actually got to get them to do a good job, which is a whole different thing. It's people management.
Yep.
So it's actually a very different animal. And so if you go in with it's all all roses, but it's not, then that's a problem, because you don't really understand what the role is.
Yeah, and I think one hard thing with getting it as well is that honestly, there's no way they can get it until they try it. Like, they can get pretty close, but it's kind of like, I don't know, you never really know what it's like to drive a car until you try to drive a car. You watch your parents drive and you think, oh yeah, that looks pretty simple. You steer the wheel and it's all hunky-dory. And you get behind the wheel and you think, that's actually harder than I thought, when you're first learning. And I think, until you really try it, you'll never really get it, but the closer they can get to getting it, the better, because then they can move on to the next part, which is wanting it. And if we look at wanting it, the way I look at this is, again, firstly, if there's a misperception of what they think they get or what they think the role entails, they can't want it. All they can decide if they want is what they think the role is. So if we look back to what you're saying, if my perception is that the role is, taking people out for coffees, having a nice yarn, nice dry office, more pay, ute, iPhone, laptop, iPad, whatever, and, this cruisy job where I don't have to crawl in roofs and under houses, well then I'm like, yeah, hell yeah, I want that. But it's when I realize that it's 100 phone calls a day, it's dealing with the fact that the materials never turned up on site, it's dealing with the angry clients, it's dealing with the, the dramas from your team, it's being responsible and accountable for all of these results. That's when they start going, oh, I'm not sure about that. And I think the key part that usually goes missing, especially with this role, like putting a tradesman up to an ops manager, is that they were great on the tools, but they knew nothing about managing people. And so they can be very task-focused, and then they have to now do a very people-focused role. And the hard part with that is that they think they want it, but what they really want is the status, the promotion, the upgrade. They don't want to actually do the job. So I heard a really good example of this is that if you asked, Obama, hey, what was your best day of your presidency? The problem would be if he said inauguration, because as much as it's a nice ceremony and all that, and it's a good sort of like validation, that's not being the president. That's becoming the president. Like you'd hope he would say when Obamacare went live or something, a significant thing that he did. So
let's not get into that debate.
Not getting into that, but my point is like, to be upgraded to an ops manager, you don't want to be an ops manager. You want to do the ops manager role. That's the key with wanting it, is you need to want to do the role, not to want to have the role. And that's quite a different thing. So once you've made it clear what the role is and they get it, you need to have a really frank conversation with them about, do they genuinely want to do this job description? Not do they want to have the role? Which I think is, again, going to get a little bit cloudy at times, because as a tradesman, like when you're on the tools, you're a journeyman, you're busting your ass and you're thinking, where's my brightness of future? What's next for me? Where can I go from here? Everybody looks in the mirror and thinks, I want to be better than I was yesterday. And there definitely comes a point when you're working on the tools where the natural progression is, I'm going to become maybe an operations manager. And so you want that because you want the progression, but it's the progression you want. It's not actually to manage people. And so there's definitely a conflict there in their head. But once they get it, they need to want it.
Yeah, and want it doesn't mean that they have to be excited about every single aspect of the job, because there'll be parts of every job, this one included, that are not, amazing, but it's that they're prepared to do it as well.
Absolutely.
And that might be, phone calls on a Saturday morning if the team's working on Saturday and something's wrong. You've got to take those calls and field it. Or on Friday afternoon, you've got to, take the call when you're thinking about just winding down for the day. You've got to take that stuff. That's your job. And if you're not prepared to do it, you may not, be excited about everything. That's okay. But if you're not prepared to do it, then that's a problem. Yeah. And that's what happens sometimes, because in management, the boundaries between your sort of work and personal life do get more blurred. And I'm not saying they should be over the top. I mean, there's obviously a balance here, but that's the way things are.
Yeah.
And if you want to move ahead, you got to be on board with that.
Yeah. And one more thing to add to that point is you also need to be really on board with understanding where you're going to find your value and your validation. Because when you're on the tools, you're going to find your value and validation by standing back, looking at a project and going, I did that. I built that. I made that. I put that together. My dad was a Sparky, and it's
Sparky dad.
Every second house you drive past. Did you know I did the wiring on that? Okay, mate, thank you. And for all of us out there, I'm sure you probably say to your kids, you drive past somewhere you worked on, you go, oh, I worked on that place. I built that house, whatever. And that's cool. But the difference is as an ops manager, you didn't. You didn't do any of that, but it happened because of you. And I think that's really an important switch that they need to make. And often it can take a long time for them to come to grips with that. And there's a definite period of time where they can really struggle to feel validated or valued, and to value their own work. And it's a dark place to be. And so again, this is something they need to understand going into it. You need to prep them for that. And then, they need to want that as well, is to understand that I'm going to get my value in a different way, and then be able to embrace it from the get-go, or you're going to have a really rough time at the start. And
this is a challenge that, the people we're helping in our coaching program, as owners, you've gone through this as well. If you're in a position to where you're appointing managers, obviously you've become the manager, you've probably got yourself out of the field a fair bit, and you've had to go through the same thing of figuring out how you get satisfaction from your work. And everything that you've done as soon as you bring people in behind you, they're going to have to go through the same emotional process. So you need to, I guess, help them be aware of that as much as you can, and that'll help them succeed as well.
Definitely. Which I suppose brings us to capacity to do it.
Capacity to do it is the third thing, and capacity to do it means have they got the chops? Have they got the stuff, the skills, the ability to do it? And I guess there's three sort of areas. There's technical skills, and so that's they understand the jobs, and I do think that's helpful. You sometimes will get ops managers who aren't tradespeople, but typically they do have affinity with construction and building, and they have an idea of how it all works.
And as a caveat, that's usually in a much bigger business where the ops manager runs a handful of foremen or project managers. It wouldn't work quite as well in a smaller trades business where the ops manager is directly running a small team that are the whole team. It might be, it could work, but it's harder, right?
Sometimes it might be an associated trade. I mean, but we're talking about hiring someone from within. That would typically be, when you bring someone from the outside.
Right.
So technical skills are important, but they're less important for this role than other skills. And so the other types of skills that I think are important are organizational skills, and then we've got the people or soft skills. And so three things: technical, organization is the ability to organize shit basically.
Yeah.
And so that's the ability to hold complex ideas and schedules in your head, and it's the ability to plan stuff out and make a plan. And so that's making sure materials are where they need to be, planning out work schedules, organising resourcing, so you've got team members in the right spot, all that sort of stuff.
Managing a project, making sure all the purchase orders add up to the materials that actually came on site, so that you're not blowing out and with your costs with your merchants, all that stuff.
Yep. So that stuff is important. And then the people skills, or they're often called soft skills. I don't know why they're called soft skills. That makes them sound a bit fluffy.
They're the hardest ones, actually.
But they are the hardest ones. I mean, this is where the great leaders come from, is that they actually have good people skills. And I think, Phil, you talked about it. You get promoted to management and ops management because you're good at the task. You're good at task-focused stuff. But then you need to be good at the people-focused to succeed at this.
Yeah.
But you still need a task-focused bent because it's about getting stuff done.
Yeah.
But you got to get it done through people.
Well, ironically, the funny thing is you get to be so good at being task-focused that we reward you with not being allowed to do that anymore.
It's weird, right?
And having to be a completely different person, because inherently we're probably going to tend more towards being task-focused or people-focused. And often the people that are the best at the task-focused activities are the ones you promote into doing people-focused activities. And so it's a transition, man.
It's quite an unlearning.
It's a headbend.
It is a headbend. And often these people, they may have demonstrated some of these people skills, but they may not have had the opportunity to demonstrate them a lot yet. But it's trying to figure out, before you promote them, do they have the right raw materials to do this? And so the things that are important here is, are they people who can handle pressure? So are they people who seem to stay calm under pressure? Because calmness is important when you're doing your own work, but man, is it important when you've got a team. Because if you've got someone who kind of gets wound up and starts to lose perspective and tends to be a little bit dictatorial and lash out or lose their rag, then that's not a good thing, and you don't want that. So that's important. I think the ability to be assertive and hold clients accountable is really important. So that's about having the emotional strength to have, challenging conversations with people. So a challenging conversation might be, hey man, seems like you're having some trouble getting to work on time. What's going on? And fronting that. Hey man, notice the way you talked to the client the other day, like had some feedback. That's not the way we roll. Can we talk about that? What happened? Your, the way, the speed that you're working, man, like that's, seem to be struggling. What's going on there? Those are difficult conversations to have.
Even with clients, like, hey mate, like the way that you spoke to our tradesman the other day is just actually unacceptable. And like, we love working with you, but honestly, if that behavior continues, then we're going to walk off site. Like, that's just unacceptable. It's not the way that we deal with you, and we don't expect to be dealt with that way.
So the ability to be assertive and stand up for yourself is hugely important. And that is often a challenge, because even people who are really good technically, hard-working, sometimes they don't have the chops to actually stick their hand up and say, hey, we need to talk about stuff. So that's important. Emotional awareness. This is a huge one. This, to me, marks out the winners from the people who struggle. And that's the ability to understand where other people are coming from, to understand, how your behavior and your activities actually affect them, to understand that, maybe if you're having some difficulty communicating with one of your team members, what's going on for them, what's going on in their life that's making it difficult, and what are you doing? Are you approaching it in the best way? Are you coming on too strong, or you're not being, respectful, or how can you do it a different way yourself? Because the good leaders, they understand that everyone's a bit different, and they know that some people struggle, but they're always looking to change the way they approach things rather than blame other people for what's going on. So if you find yourself someone who's always, or you think about promoting someone who's good at blaming other people, that's probably a red flag. That doesn't go well in leadership. So that people stuff is massive. I mean, it's like having conversations with people about maybe they're having trouble at home with their relationships, and being able to be respectful and have that conversation. As I said, the apprentice who first love goes down the tubes, and they're bereft and heartbroken, and trying to pick them up, and all that sort of stuff is part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. We've also got difficult clients, right? I mean, like, you're going to have to deal with them too. I mean, really, you're going to have people that have all kinds of problems. Some of them are being demanding. Some of them are going to be, downright rude to you, like we mentioned before. Some of them are going to, have organizational issues, but actually being able to be assertive enough to deal with those issues, bring them up and solve them in a way where you make your point clearly, you set a different expectation, but also not in a way where you necessarily have to have a fight with the client and lose them either. This is a skill, and it's something that needs to be practiced and developed. We have these kind of conversations actually constantly in our personal life where we choose to be quite tactful, but often doing those in a work situation can be a different story. So I mean, dealing with difficult clients has a lot of facets.
Yeah, that's super challenging, and particularly when you're like, geez, these people feed us, like these are the people who pay the bills.
Yeah.
So that's a big one, and I think the thing with this is that the soft skills are often harder to train, and I'm going to be honest, some people are just much better at this stuff than others. I definitely think everyone can learn 100%, but there's certain personality types, I'm sure you agree, are just better at this stuff, and it's just much easier to work with those people. I mean, I'd rather hire the people who have the right attitudes for this role than the people who have all the experience, maybe don't have the right attitude.
Absolutely. And I think that really brings us to, I think, the last piece of this, which is one way or another, you're going to have to mentor and train these skills. So, whether it's the organizational skills or the soft skills or both, you will have to train them. And it doesn't actually matter who you put in that role. Like if it's an internal promotion, someone who's coming up off the tools, then this is all stuff that even if they've shown signs they can do it and looks like they have the capacity, they won't be the fully formed product. You're going to have to train them on this stuff quite proactively for them to actually succeed. If you hire someone from an outside organization and bring them in, even if they have management, experience, when you bring them in, they might seem like they came batteries included because they've done this before, they've done it successfully, but doing it in your environment with your team is different than doing it in a previous environment with a different team. They still need to, build some trust with your team. They still need to learn your systems and your processes and your ways and get to know your clients. Like, they're not going to be perfect straight off the bat. They still need training. And so whenever you put anyone into this role, it doesn't actually matter who you take from where. You're not just going to be able to set and forget. You're going to have to spend some time proactively upskilling them wherever they have deficiencies and basically bedding them into the team to set them up for success, because no one's the finished product.
They aren't. And the key thing with this is that think about those people who are, super technical in your business and are great. They might be the right person, but don't just judge them on technical skills. Judge them on all this other stuff that we've talked about as well. Do they understand the role? Do they want to do the role? And do they actually have the ability, the raw ability to do some of this stuff? When you've made the decision, like you said then, don't just let them go. You have to actually dedicate time to coaching them, not just on, the technical stuff, but more importantly on how you would deal with individual situations. And so, say for example, in our $1 Million Tradie coaching program, we have a concept called the 20. So every week, the operations manager would have a 20 with their, with the owner or their direct supervisor, and that's where they talk about how things are going on the job, in their role. And so they can have a time to talk about, well, I've got this person who's chronically late. How do I deal with that situation? Talk about how to deal with that. And once you get, really skilled, we have businesses now who actually have training programs, to actually teach people that stuff when they get bigger, to actually start building those soft skills, because that's the stuff that's really going to set them apart, build their culture and create, an absolute weapon of a business.
Yeah, and when we look back to capacity to do it, I mean, really, like, this is where this comes in, because I would say someone has the capacity to manage people because of signs I've seen in the way that they deal with people and, the relationships they have within the business. But it doesn't mean that they've practiced the skill. It just means that they have that natural ability. And so capacity to do it, can look like a lot of different things, but often the capacity is actually the raw materials. It's not the finished product. You're still going to have to take those raw materials and, train and develop them into the finished product. So don't neglect that part. It's really what makes the whole thing work. Doesn't matter where you get the person from, but all in all, they need to get it and understand it. They need to want it and want what it actually is, not what they think it is, and then have the capacity to do it. At the very least, the raw skills. And obviously, the more developed those skills are, the better. But you're going to have to train them one way or another to make this work. So why don't we land this plane?
Let's do it. There's always the temptation when you have a strong performer to make them a manager. And this might be the right thing to do. But before you do it, just pause and think through all the implications. Make sure they're a person who really understands what the role is, that they want to do it, and that they've got the raw materials to actually do it. By doing this, you're going to save yourself a lot of stress and hassle. You'll get the right person and your business will fly. Thanks heaps for listening. We'll catch you all again next time.
See you later.
Congratulations on being part of a select group of savvy business owners who are taking their businesses to the next level. And to help you on your journey, don't forget to check out our show notes for a copy of our free book, The Profitable Tradie, and other valuable resources. Thanks for being a part of this special group, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Profitable Tradie podcast.